And we are live on our YouTube channel. It is Trending in Education, but better yet, it is the Citadel. Dan Strafford, Michael Palmer, Brandon Jones, Ken Florence, and Frank Jones. We are here with you following the Battle of Winterfell. Gut check time, gentlemen. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I survived the Battle of Winterfell, so that's saying something, right? So and this is like fog. We're still like fog of war. I didn't have time to like get all my hot takes off the interwebs. This is all like we're all still kind of digesting what just happened. So kind of an exciting twist in that these takes are going to be very fresh. They're very like hot and fresh. So that'll be fun.
Brandon, how about yourself?
Yeah, you gave a gut check. I guess the Night King got a gut check. That didn't work out so well. I think we should probably disclaim that this is going to be straight coming off episode 3 in season 8. So if you're watching this or hearing this and you haven't seen it, like this is the worst decision ever. So
now's the time to check out.
Definitely check out right now. I'm doing great. I was really stressed out for I'm speaking as if we're past tense. It's present tense. Like that was a very stressful experience that continues. But I'm doing well.
And let's check in with Frank and Ken. Frank, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm going to share the same sentiment, right? It's just a lot to process. That's literally what I said after it went off. I had just stopped there for a moment and was like, okay, I just got to, from the top to the bottom, to a lot of thoughts, to a lot of emotions, a lot of range of emotions, you know. So yeah, I'm interested to hear how, as we talk through this, some of the ideas and concepts that are going to organically grow, because it's, like Mike's saying, we're fresh off.
And we're here for you, Frank, too. Like, you know, just so you know, like, you know, you're not alone working through your feelings.
And
people need people.
Happy to welcome Ken Florence as well. Ken is behind the music that you hear on the Citadel, so we appreciate him for that, but also a big fan of GOT. Ken, how you doing? Oh, Ken's microphone is muted, so not muted here in Zoom, but we'll get back to Ken momentarily. He was talking before, so we'll troubleshoot that on the fly here and make sure everybody is up to speed. Brandon, let's start with you. We'll check back in with Ken momentarily as we talk through here. But initial reaction, good episode, bad episode. You made a very specific point on our last Citadel about there was a high ceiling, low floor for this episode. Did it meet your expectations?
I think pretty close to the ceiling. It was pretty great. You know, there was Deus Ex Aria at the end that made it wrap up. Like, if it had ended with everyone dying, all the living dying, that would have been worse. So I think a really good episode. It was the beginning of it was really hard. It was actually kind of hard to process because there was Mike mentioned the phrase fog of war. There's a quite literal fog of war. It was hard to follow through the snowstorm and people were getting lost, but I think they did a nice job of imperiling all of our characters that we like know and love. I really felt anyway that they all were in danger at sort of all times in the episode. I also think they did a nice job of sort of resolving what I think is a little bit of an OP problem and an overpowered problem with the dragons. Because if the dragons had been able to be in the whole fight, presumably they would have been able to just continue to burn and burn and burn and burn.
Right.
So I did a nice job with that. And it was pretty dramatic. It was pretty stressful, as I mentioned. I thought really, really good episode.
Mike, how about yourself? You agreed with Brandon, I think, on our last Citadel. I know Frank was on the first. We'll get to Frank momentarily about his take here. But did it live up to your expectations?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I thought it was it's got a little popcorn kind of at the end with the Arya move. Like that felt a little more. It made sense, but it also was. I'm usually. I expected the Night King to last longer, I guess. So like I felt like it was a little too tight an ending, and then suddenly the Army of the Dead's just gone, which, you know, was established earlier in the story. And then also, honestly, I did forget that Arya was like scurrying around just because so much stuff was going on. And and then I also was just waiting for Theon to go the way he went. I mean, that was pretty much a fait accompli. So I felt like plot wise, if I'd had time to think about it, it probably felt a little pat and not totally obvious, but I mean, you wouldn't expect the showrunners to have Jon kill the Night King like right. That would have been totally pat, totally on the nose. This felt like a pretty fast way to resolve that entire narrative, but I think they delivered brilliantly on it. Like and also the suspense in this one really throughout. So like I think the battle scenes were intense, but like for like 100 and however many minutes, over an hour, like an hour and a half, I think over an hour and a half, right? It just really kept you never knew what was going to happen, and it maintained that really for the entirety of the episode. And even before the battle started, it's still just there was this tension in the air that and then to Brandon's point, like they needed a better, like, the Red Woman was there. You would think she might have like some sense of like a cold front coming through. And then also perhaps like maybe they had some spotlight magic or something just to make it less dark. Because like for the beginning of it was just really dark. And when they're flying around in like the snowstorm, I was just totally confused, and I think they wanted me to be, but right. But overall, I thought they did a great job.
And I think that's a good way to turn. Frank, I watched this episode the first 10 minutes and thought my TV wasn't set correctly. Like I thought my settings were off because it was just consistently wondering what I was looking at. Did you get a sense of, similar to Brandon Mike, that you didn't know what was going on, or did you have a better sense of what was happening next?
Absolutely disoriented for the first 22 or so minutes. I'm just like, okay, I think this person's still alive, right? Because even how they were cutting it, people were kind of getting like ambushed, and you've seen them like, and feeling painful. And I'm like, okay, is this mean that this person's gone? Are we going to see another cut to this person? So that whole element, I think, was good because it continued to build suspense, right? You didn't know who was surviving from cutscene to cutscene, the whole fog and the notion that you couldn't even really see anything. The opening scene, I thought, where they were marching into the darkness was also awesome, right? Like building up again that we know something's on the other side. We have no idea what it looks like or what it's going to be when we meet heads with it. And I thought they did a brilliant job of maintaining suspense in that anxious feeling throughout the entire episode. And in typical fashion, right? Like they answered some questions and opened up a whole can of others, right? So I think that the next arc is going to be, it's probably going to feel a little bit more drawn out, right? Given the fact that the Night King did kind of meet his end in a would seem to feel like a more rapid ending, and I think now looking at his storyline over the entire series, we're going to say, well, he was an integral character, but if we really think to his actual screen time and really getting to really understand his motives and meaning, it's still kind of open to us.
I had a viewing partner, my wife, a couple of times saying, so what does he want exactly? Like a couple of different times during this episode. And in the end, I think we're still left with that question, to be quite honest. We know he wanted it eternal night, but why and how this all came to be is still open. Ken, I'm going to come back to you, hoping audio is all set. I want to hear from you later on, Ken, about the music in this episode. I want to hear about your take on how they used the minor major chords and how there was a different, I feel like, tone to this one. But your gut check, what you thought about this one from a strict viewership standpoint and whether or not it delivered on what you were expecting.
Well, first of all, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Back in business. Wow. Yeah, my heart's still beating, so that's a good sign, I think. I guess they did their job on that front. I don't know, just a lot of really dazzling just visualing features in this. The lighting up of the Dothraki blades, I thought was amazing. I really, really liked a strong appearance from the Lord of Light. in this episode. And I was kind of waiting for the Lord of Light to kind of show himself. And I think we all kind of were wondering, is this guy real? What's the deal with the Lord of Light? And I think, I don't know, I guess he proved himself to be real in this episode. Really liked the ending with Lady Melisandre kind of walking out into the vast expanse, and I guess she had served her purpose and expended the rest of her Lord of Light energies in this last of battles.
She was all.
Where was she? Where was she? She just rolled up like out of nowhere, just out of the darkness, just like, hey, everyone, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Battle's about to happen. Figured I'd stop in and see what's up. Like,
and then like
came out of nowhere.
That stretch at the end was really all music, Ken, right? Like in terms of the sound, like it was just there was very little dialogue, you know, like I think there was whatever Bran was saying to Theon, but like that was about the only dialogue in the last, like a pretty good stretch there. And like, talk about mood too, you know, because like it does feel like there was really good mood setting in this episode. And I felt like, I guess, was it cellos or something? Like there was this sort of like brooding score at the end.
The cellos are the Game of Thrones mainstay, you know. I think they took a different turn on this one though. They went kind of Hans Zimmer with the ticking, the clock ticking, just insistent ticking. I guess it started around like the middle of the episode and basically went into the last scene. Because I mean, there's only so much that they can. There's only so long they can sustain that epic music for. Eventually, that kind of just like blends into the background. So they have to do something to change it up. But on the sound front, though, I thought I kept on thinking something was going to happen to Grey Worm because they kept on getting heavy breathing from him. You know, and I thought, oh, he's about to go, but he didn't apparently. So
are we sure about? Yeah, so I thought that too. Do we know who didn't die?
Well,
we need a confirmed kill list, right?
I think that's
yes.
I'll be honest. I was taking notes on memo pad, and I kept on saying "dead?" because I wasn't sure exactly what's happening. I think Grey Worm's alive. I think we saw. So, Mike, I know you were keeping some notes as well as far as who passed. Alessandra took herself out of the situation. She walked out. Jorah has departed us.
Looked like it, right? I mean, there wasn't an on-screen death. He was like mortally wounded and was like pretty close to out, but I don't, you know, it'd be pretty weird if he came back, right?
Theon, pretty sure. Theon Dunsky.
Yeah.
Yes. Night King didn't look very good for the Night King, right?
It did.
As far as we could tell.
Lyanna Mormont.
Lyanna Mormont. Yeah.
And that's a great story. And I don't know if everybody got to watch the after the inside the episode. We're discussing her. This is an actress who was only supposed to be in one scene. She was only supposed to be in one scene, but in that one scene was what everyone fell in love with, and the showrunners decided to bring her back. And in this scene where she passes, she fell a giant, right? So this, what we got to know as this smaller woman who had a big voice and a big story behind her, fell a giant at the end, which I thought was a fitting end to her.
A zombie giant,
right?
No less. Yeah. By stabbing it in its like zombie blue eye. I mean, like that was like, and then she also died like kind of on screen, like, you know, because they were also talking about that they could only have so many like deaths, and then she came back. I mean, that was like, because I didn't know what was going to happen then. Like when he made his his signature move, and then suddenly like everybody started hopping up. By the way, as a blue-eyed gentleman, I just want to say we're not all bad. Well, Tormund, I guess, represented for. Also, it looked like Giants Bane made it through it too, right? So like, Brandon, I think you had the over/under at 5.5.
It was pretty close.
Yeah, because I was thinking if you did the count, and like, because we even talked about this, with the Night King count as major, I think we said he would, right?
He would. So you got Melisandre, the Night King, Theon, Beric. I was saying that Dolorous Ed was below the line, so I wasn't counting him as major, although I took a lot of flack from that.
Yeah.
Ghost TBD.
Lady Mormont, right? I don't know.
Lady Mormont, I think, is not major. I mean, nice character, great story.
A half. You said 5.5. I'm trying to give you. Maybe you like hit it on the nose. You know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty close. I was surprised. So I was surprised that Grey Worm. If we assume that Grey Worm is alive, and I think that we think he is, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that Brienne is alive.
Yeah,
I thought that like we had seen our last of her in episode
she
2.
had like no screen time.
Yeah,
She had a couple cutaway scenes where in each cutaway scene, it seemed as if that was going to be her last scene.
Right, right. When they overwhelmed all of them, like up against the wall or on top of the mound of dead bodies, like everyone was having the little "I'm getting overwhelmed" sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced that more of them were gonna die in that.
There was the sequence of John also running through and sort of having like his friends flash before his eyes, where I honestly felt this is a bit much, and felt they were all dying. Like I thought this was the last goodbye. We were seeing them on screen for the last time. They all survived, much to my surprise, to be honest. I thought Brienne was gone. I thought Jamie was gone a couple of times. And I thought that Tormund was definitely gone. Like there were a couple of spots where I thought he was.
And Sam made it through as well, which I found interesting that his point of view was the very first that we seen, given the fact that throughout the story, he's probably been the weakest character that we've seen on screen as well, as we geared up for this massive battle of heroic and epic proportion. It starts off with a character who's been most likely characterized as being the weakest individual. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I kept thinking Arya might go too.
Yeah.
I mean, she had a lot of, there were a lot of times when if she were to go, she could have gone that way. I wouldn't have wanted her. You don't ever want Arya to go, but like it did feel like it could have happened. Even when the Night King caught her at first, there's a moment where you're like, oh shit, it would be bad if she went right now. But because that was wild too. Because like
there's been no one more skilled, qualified, or trained to actually survive this situation more so than Arya, right?
Yeah. And assassinate, she kind of, the Night King is not an easy guy. You got to kind of catch him off guard. And that's like, because if John had come in with, John pulls his sword and like, yeah, all right, buddy, I'm just going to raise the army of the dead and I got bigger fish to fry. But it's like Arya's she's like sneak attack.
So I'm gonna throw this out here really quick.
Go ahead, no, please.
What if the Night King all along? What if this was a suicide mission, and in the sense that he knew that this was going to happen? Because I felt as if he was toying with Bran. If he was really trying to kill him, he could have killed him, right?
Like the Bond villain, right?
Right. So I'm like, maybe this is his end to his suffering. Like maybe he wanted to have all of this happen so he could finally put an end to this suffering, because he didn't want to be the Night King to begin with. He was kind of forced into this role.
I dig that. I dig it. I think it's all open, which I appreciate about the show right now, right? Like that we're able to have these conversations and sort of guess or think through what might be the reasoning behind some of these choices they're making as showrunners and the characters that are going through. I could see that. And I could see that it was from a show or movie or television perspective, them walking in reminded me a little bit of Reservoir Dogs, the scene in Reservoir Dogs where they're walking down the street, the five of them flanked out. Yeah. And him reaching for getting to Bran, there was in my mind, just do it. Just kill him. Like, don't wait for someone else to show up. Just do what you have to do. And he didn't move on with it. I do want to jump back to Wolf appearing. I know, Mike, you made mention of him before. This seems, again, Brandon, to just be a CGI add-on where they just were like, go forth and try to kill Wolf. But we're not going to talk about you any further.
Yeah, Ghost. Yeah, so they...
I'm sorry, Ghost.
I guess they spent all of their CGI budget on the dragon. They're like, so they got there, they're like, laying out their like line item budget. They're like, okay, CGI, gets me a lot of money. And then they spent it all. And the dragons are like, oh crap, we still have Ghost to put in here. And so they put him in like the charge of the Dothraki.
Yeah.
And we never to be seen again. He ghosted us. I did think this is not the question he asked, but I did want to mention this on my list of things is so I guess Game of Thrones will end with human on human resolution, which is what I think we all as humans wanted. But apologies, I don't mean to other any Night Kings and Queens out there, but assuming that the human audience wanted a human resolution, that's what we're going to get. And they were able to, which I thought was a super cool how they shot it, but they resolved the problem of the Dothraki Chargers, the Dothraki horde being brought over to Westeros. Because if Dany is going to win and they don't get all wiped out, now you've got to settle them somewhere. And they're like, I'm not sure how easily they're going to take to like just being chill and living off the land. I think like they've got the whole, we're Dothraki horde problem. Right. So they managed to solve for that pretty neatly with just a little sidecar of just throwing Ghost out there for like maybe 30 seconds of screen time. Is incredible. Is he more expensive than the dragons to shoot? Is it possible?
He just looks like a big wolf too. I mean, like it's not like
he's got a tough agent.
Couldn't they just like I'm not a video producer, but couldn't they just get a regular sized dog to like run really like close to the camera? Have Jorah Mormont like 20 yards behind him, be like, look at that big dog.
All right, so making our way through the episode, lots to digest. There are lots of near deaths and absolutely moments where I thought people like Jaime or Brienne were going to have their day to pass. But we saw the Hound seemingly suffering from anxiety or PTSD or something there, where he was finally summoned to chase after Arya. And Mike, you made mention of Arya. You kind of lost track of her and we didn't know exactly what was happening. But do you think that fence is mended, Mike? Is now Arya's list that much shorter? The Night King is taken care of. Cersei is now probably first and foremost for everybody. Is Arya's list one name shorter because the Hound helped save her in this episode?
Yeah, I don't think she has that much beef left with the Hound. The Hound also, he doesn't like fire, right. So there was a good amount of fire that he was surrounded by. So I mean, I give him a bit of a pass on that, and I think he has a history of deserting too. So like, he's not, he's a tough dude, but I think he has some anxiety issues, from time to time. But then also like the whole Song of Ice and Fire was another thing here where like this was actually for a moment it reminded me of like Heat Miser versus Snow Miser, where it was like
Santa Claus,
yeah, you had like the ice stuff versus the fire stuff, and I thought that was I don't think they're going to come back to that. You can't come back to that any more than they just did, right? So like if this was maybe they can, but like I don't think there's that much ice left. There's mostly there'll be a little bit of fire and some dragons, but like I don't know how much the ice really was the White Walkers and the Night King, the Army of the Dead. So I agree with your point too. Like kind of badass way to walk into that scene. The Night King, he rolls deep with his crew, and he also can roll strong by himself too. So like for a character with absolutely no backstory of substance or depth, he really did command the screen when he was on it.
But his crew never even got a chance. We never even seen him like do anything. They just kind of just rolled up, just like slow motion. But here,
it reminded me a little
him like stab anyone. Like,
it reminded me a little bit of Chappelle's Show when Prince is about to play basketball and he has his crew. You guys want to play basketball? And they all
right.
That's a bit of a deeper cut.
Shirts first.
I was surprised about two things on that. I was surprised, one, that we didn't see any White Walkers get killed until before the Night King. Like, I know that we've had I know we had seen a White Walker get killed, which then obliterated all the whites. Like maybe they felt like they didn't need to sell that again. But yeah, his crew was not involved at all. So they're like hiding behind the storm, and then just like with like they were like their walk-up gang. And that's it. They didn't kill anyone. Not any of them got taken out. I was also surprised. Yeah, I was also surprised they didn't give us any fallen character risen face off with a living character. Right. Like they gave the blue eyes to Lyanna Mormont and to Dollar Zed and to a handful of others, but we didn't have the agonizing like I just fought next to you and you've been my brother or sister for 8 years. Now I have to kill you again. I was surprised they didn't give us any of that.
Yeah, I think that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, it was even the way I was, like many of us, I was like, oh, why are they sending the women and children to the crypt? Because I thought that some dead characters in the crypt or in like the grounds of Winterfell would also be raised. But I guess it was more like the zombies were only extras, really. Like there was the one moment where, you know, Lyanna's eyes turned blue and you saw her waking up. But that would have been, I guess they only had so much time, and they kind of kept it tight too. There weren't a lot of digression, and also like this is one of the shows that was starting to go long and it really moved. I mean, like that show, this one probably could have gone another half hour and I don't think I would have noticed, frankly, just because like they were somewhat disciplined, I thought, in terms of what they put on screen, which I guess made sense. I mean, it's a battle; everything's pretty intense. I also was hoping more stuff would have happened in the crypt, but nothing really happened down there. It was
we got a little bit of the crypt walkers coming out and coming after the people down there, and you saw the breakthrough of the one. We didn't get, to your point though, Mike, any of the named characters joining that assault down there in the crypt. When we saw Tyrion and Sansa have their moment, we saw them, you know, sort of maybe reconnect in some way down there as the crypts were being broken open. Do you think, Frank, that was you mentioned a missed opportunity? Do you think that was even more so, where we didn't get a Ned Stark, any of the named Starks down there to come back and maybe wreak some havoc before the Night King saw his end?
Yeah, you know, we thought about that before, and I think the challenge there is that you'd have been introducing characters that wouldn't have been on the show previously, right? Because Ned's body was never brought back. Mm-hmm. I don't think the bodies came back from the weddings, right? So we wouldn't have. It'd have been someone's like great auntie would have been like, yeah, I mean, we get it that, you know, this is a start, but do we really have any investment in this person coming back and fighting? So,
and they would have been super skeletal too, right? Like they would have been just a skeleton. You'd have been like, okay, now you've got like the shape, you got like the hip bones of a Stark. I can tell, but I'm not sure which Stark you are because everybody's been decomposed for so long. Other than maybe Rob. Was Rob all decomposed?
I don't think Rob made it back though, right?
Yeah, I guess he didn't. You're right. He didn't make it back in the Red Wedding.
I'm thinking the only one who may have, and that's probably still unlikely, would have been Rickon from the Battle of the Bastards. But there were so many dead bodies at that point. Like, how they would have even sorted him out? Right?
I'm going to keep digging to find this little boy body.
Right.
We did have the nice moment. Theon getting his moment of forgiveness from Bran towards the end here, Ken, where he turned and said, "You're a good man." He charged at the Night King. Was there a moment for you, Ken, where have you ever thought, "Oh, he's going to get to him. He's going to kill the Night King," or was this a foregone conclusion that Theon had met his match?
Well, that was the moment where I was kind of expecting that Bran and the Night King to kind of high five each other and reveal that they were the same entity. Because obviously, if you read the various hypotheses floating around, that was one of the main ones. And I mean, I thought that was plausible, honestly, because what other interest did the Night King really have with Bran? I think it's still unclear, like what the nature of their relationship is. Mm-hmm. I was expecting some kind of more interesting or more intricate connection between the two of them to kind of be revealed at that moment.
I was waiting for him to say something to Arya of, you just killed my father, you just killed me 200 years from now, but we didn't get that. Seems like that's all said and done. Frank,
he was even starting to draw his sword, right? Like it seemed like the Night King was just gonna smite Bran. Like after that, after everything that happened before, he's just gonna just waste the kid in the wheelchair. I mean, I thought they would at least have had. And I guess the Night King never says anything either, right? Like he just kind of looks. Yeah, and raises.
You can see a lot with this there, Mike. You can see a lot with this.
I had the same take, just to plus one what Ken just said. Like I really thought that the Bran Night King engagement was going to have been orchestrated by Bran. That like his saying, "Theon, you're a good man," felt like it was setting up. I've set this whole thing up. Mm-hmm. I like the image of the high five between Bran and the Night King. I may not have expected specifically that, but effectively that. I was definitely thinking some sort of communing between the two of them, and it was just regular old, big baddie Bond villain, as we were saying before. Like, just takes too long to kill the three-eyed raven, and then gets got by jumping Jehoshaphat there. Like, it felt like there should have been something more intricate.
And what was Bran even doing? He left and said, I'll be back, but he was just flying around. He didn't come back with any new information. He was just flying around for the sake of flying around. Like, dude, like, we need you now. Like, tell us, like, he's approaching from the east, like something.
Sometimes you just got to work. I mean, sometimes you just got to see what's out there and stretch your legs a little bit. You got to get out there and do what you got to do. And that's what he was doing. And he came back at the opportune time, right as the Night King approached. I'll agree. I have a +1 to the +1 that I really expected something more intricate there on the greeting or some sort of reveal. Mike, do you feel like this spills over into episode 4? Do we get more explanation? Or does this whole plot turn to Cersei on the southern border?
I mean, the coming attraction scenes make it look like the plot progresses pretty fast, and we're halfway through the final season, and we've addressed like half of the sort of the major the competing army, so that's resolved. So I think is a little bit of what I think Brandon was touching on. This probably, and I think Frank would have mentioned it too. It's probably a little body count, kind of like what's the state of our army. So I would expect that they realize they're not in particularly good shape. The dragons hopefully are okay, So I think that's assuming they still have the dragons. I think they feel pretty good, and I think in the coming attractions, it sounded like Danny was ready to kind of bring the pain, So I am curious though, because that's now 2 episodes since we've seen Cersei.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's going
all
on?
Cersei from here on out, right? I imagine she's going to be in every episode from here on out.
Yeah,
exactly. But like, what is, this was her sort of, she was anticipating a major conflict that she could then fight a depleted army
right
in the end game, and that does seem like it has played forward. I thought because it did look pretty bad, right? I mean, by the time Arya did the deed, there weren't huge ranks left anywhere, which is why even the question about Grey Worm and like some of it'd be odd though just to be like, oh, by the way, we were looking over in the keep over here, and we did find Missandei and Grey Worm were dead, like off screen. Like that would just be like, give us that action if it was going to happen.
Although I think they might do that with one character. You're not going to do that with like 5 characters, but right. I think that episode 4 should start with like an accounting of who's left.
Yes,
they're going to have to look for people. Like, we don't know who died in the crypt, right? Like, we saw some people who didn't: Tyrion, Sansa, Varys. I don't know that we saw everyone who didn't.
Do we have tabs on Gendry? Do we know where he's at? I couldn't figure out where he landed. Last time I recall seeing him, he was on the wall, right?
Yeah. I think that's the last. Although we saw him like snogging Arya again in the coming attractions, as Mike called. So I think he's doing okay. For me, just one other note on the war here. So I thought going into this episode that there was no way they were going to kill the Night King in episode 3, because that was too. Yep. But as I was watching it, I realized they had a real problem if they didn't, because let's say what I thought was going to happen coming into the episode was, like a band of, I don't know, fewer than 100 people, maybe many fewer than 100, like all the majors were going to escape, maybe via dragon, maybe via something else. But if that happens, doesn't the Night King just raise all of the dead again?
Right.
Like the problem is you kind of need, if you don't kill him in this episode, you need to have this episode again, the same episode, basically,
right,
with a twice as large army. And that kind of seems lousy. So as I saw him raise all those people, I was like, oh no, he has to die. Because otherwise the showrunners, they've got a problem on their hands that then now you really need some magic to resolve it. Like the Golden Company isn't going to kill the army of the dead, which is not twice as big. Like that's so I guess they had to do what they had to do, and now we're turning to resolving it with Cersei. I think that'll be interesting.
Do we have a way forward for each of our characters. So we saw Arya do what maybe her character was intended to do. You heard Melisandre say about a couple of other characters. They had been brought back for these deeds. They served their purpose. They moved on. Melisandre obviously clearing her way by stepping out into the snow and passing away as she did, taking her necklace off and aging to whatever age she was, as it were. But Frank, do you see the path forward? Does Jaime confront Cersei? Is it Jaime and Brienne going forward to lead this army against Cersei with Jon and Dany on their dragons? Or what do you see as the next steps?
Yeah, I think there's several conflicts that have been building throughout the series that you have to have resolved, right? The Lannisters, all of that family drama has to come to a head with Tyrion, Jaime, and Cersei. The Hound and the Mountain, right? They have to eventually have their brotherly conflict as well. And then, there's still the kind of unresolved tension between Dany and Jon, really. Like, they fought together and they still love each other, but they still haven't really determined who's going to sit on the throne once we take over Cersei, right? So
or address the larger question of their relationship, but that might be a different time.
Right. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of these build-ups come to a head in the next couple of episodes.
Brandon, what about yourself? What do you see as you made mention of what may happen in episode 4 if the Night King had survived, or what would happen the rest of the season? Now that we've gotten to this resolution in this episode, do you see tie lines ahead of you? And obviously the showrunners will make it work for each of these characters that we believe have survived.
Yeah, so I mean, you only have 3 episodes left, right? And so presumably there's going to be much of the last episode 6 is going to be reserved for just sort of neat and tidy wrapping up any loose ends. So you maybe have like an episode, two and a half episodes and 2 episodes. So I mean, clearly there needs to be a counting of the survivors and then a banding together and a committing to going south and figuring out what may come. And presumably the battle at King's Landing happens in episode 5. Because that's another long one. I guess they're all long from here on out, but that's another long one. Same director. Yeah. So I think it could go a lot of different directions. We keep on talking about how they say it's going to be bittersweet. I think you're going to have to pull all the characters through what they're going through together in the next 3 hours, basically. And so I would say it's gonna whatever happens, gonna happen soon. That's my hot take.
As we continue on, Mike, anything we've missed? Anything from your viewing? Anything that stood out on this episode that you think is worth mentioning? Either a singular interaction or a larger plot line that maybe we didn't discuss as of yet?
I just think it's felt very cinematic to me. I think when Ken was talking about some of the visual elements and the sound, and even just the scale of the production, I think is something that is still, I think on first viewing, you only kind of get a sort of a loose sense of it. Like it's the type of thing that I do. This is an episode I'm going to want to watch again, just to try to understand really like the artistry that goes into this, because I think it'll be difficult. Obviously, the production company will still be around, but like the budget they were able to command and like the use of location, and then just the aggregation of talent to pull off despite some of the shortcomings that we've already talked about. It's really awe-inspiring, and it's also just amazing to me that it's it's not TV, it's HBO, but it is TV. I'm not going. I actually wish my TV was bigger too. I was like, this would have been something that would have been phenomenal to see on a huge screen with surround sound. So like I imagine that probably will be in the future of this franchise too, is that episodes like this will probably have screenings out and in bigger venues, and I actually would look forward to that, because I think this really rivals anything that you would see in the movie theaters these days.
I think that's a great point, and something we talked about on the last Citadel and something we talked about in between episodes is that this battle was the longest cinematic battle in TV or film history, right? So I want to ask you each, from your point of view, let's go with Ken first. Is this the best battle in Game of Thrones history? Or is it Blackwater or Hardhome or something else that maybe stands out to you? Does this stand out as the best, or do you turn back to something else in previous Game of Thrones history, and that is your favorite battle of this series?
I think it probably does have to take the cake. I mean, it wasn't as shocking at the end of it as some of the other battles have been, and I think that's really why some of the other ones stood out to the degree that they did. But this one, I think everyone's emotions were just so captivated by it. Everything's just been building up, and this is kind of just like the whole entire series has been brought to a head in this one episode. And so I think everyone's emotions were just so wrapped up into it. And obviously the fact that the visuals were so stunning and the cinematography was so amazing. Like you guys just said, it's one of the most spectacular productions ever to air on television. Well, not television, but HBO. I think, in my opinion, it's going to have to take the cake.
Now, one of the things I read, Frank, was in the early days of this series, they had to not really shoot the battles because they didn't have the budget for it. So they had to you saw Tyrion got blacked out in one battle and he came to and explained it all. And this, though, was that broad, as Mike was saying, you probably would see it on a big screen, right? This is very cinematic.
Right?
Yeah. To your viewpoint, is this the best battle we've seen in Game of Thrones, or does Hardhome or Battle of the Bastards or one of the other battles stand out to you?
I think this is the most epic. It's not my personal favorite, though. I think my personal favorite is still the Battle of the Bastards for some reason. The franticness of that and how it was shot and how you just felt like the suffocation. I felt like during the Battle of the Bastards, I actually felt like I was being trapped. And when the people started falling on top of Jon and he was like gasping for air, like I felt more emotionally attached to that experience. Not to say that there weren't moments during this battle where I didn't lose my breath and I weren't breathing for periods of time. I just personally, I thought the Battle of the Bastards was a little bit more moving for me. But yeah, I think, again, what's interesting too is that, as I'll say that, the other battles didn't have as many cut away scenes from actual fighting, right? I think this was probably the longest battle for sure, but it was interspliced with shots of the crypt, shots of the dragons. Like you just didn't see people nonstop fighting the entire time. So I thought that was an interesting way to kind of also elongate the battle as well.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on what Frank's saying, I think the battle scene in Battle of the Bastards, I enjoyed more as just a pure battle. Like that just felt like, because it's also human on human, like we talked about too. Like I felt like this episode was more about battling a supernatural foe, and I'd say as an episode there was probably more sort of central plot development and suspense. So maybe the episode itself might have even been better than Battle of the Bastards, because of Battle of the Bastards I really just remember the battle itself. But I do think I think I would agree with Frank. Like that one for some reason that's why I'm curious what episode 5 is going to be like, because basically you don't want to just unravel from here. You want to be able to maintain at this level, and then in some ways even dial it up a bit for episode 5. And I'm trying to figure out how they'll do that, but I imagine episode 5 might have more of the feel of Battle of the Bastards.
Brandon, do you have a favorite battle yourself?
Yeah, this probably isn't it. So I like this one a lot. I'm going to add to some of the things that others have said, which I agree with. Too dark / foggy. I spent a long time being like, what? Right. It feels like the dimensions of Winterfell changed this season. And so, like, I at times when Arya was in like this grand library that didn't exist until tonight.
When she started running, I was like, "Where's she running
Where
to?"
was she running?
I thought she was just in a room.
I feel like I feel like you could run a lap around like OG Winterfell in like 3 minutes,
Right.
like 5 minutes maybe. if you're Sam Tarley. So I was a little disoriented. I didn't know where I was at all times as I was watching it. On the plus side, I'll get to my favorite in a second, but on the plus side, a thing we haven't talked about was I think the dragon on dragon, like the dragons flying up above into the sort of above the cloud line was pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
I still, back to my like, didn't know what was going on point. I didn't know which dragon had gotten killed. I guess none did until the end, but
And then you see the Night King like, whoa.
I saw the Night King fall, but then and he was like pretty chill when he fell. But like the Rhaegal on Viserion fight, no idea who won that.
Right.
Until Viserion was still there. But I thought that was pretty nice. I think my favorite battle sequence is the first battle at the Wall, where there's a threat on both sides, and like the Wall is really imposing. I think it's a really cool creation of George R. R. Martin's. The huge army against whatever it was, 90 men guarding it, and just when you think they're gaining the upper hand with their like big wall scythe or whatever it is, then Tormund's party is coming from behind. So I felt like that was both grand in scale because of the wall, but also the battle in the courtyard was more contained. So that's my favorite. I think I've watched that one I don't know how many times, and I've watched this last episode once, so it may be that it grows on me. But I'm looking forward to episode 5 when it's presumably going to be like probably like daytime when they fight. That's my I'm gonna guess daytime for the fight in episode 5.
I did have a couple of moments of how long is this night? This seems like a very long night. Isn't the sun going to come up eventually? And I guess it has with the Night King falling. But anybody have any further takes on this episode specifically? When it asks some series long perspectives before we head out on our live stream here. But Frank, anything else you want to add on overall takes on the episode or where we currently stand after this one?
Nothing specific, I don't think, about this episode. No, I'm good.
All right. So the take I want to hear from each of you, Ken, let's start with you, is now that this episode has happened and we've seen the Battle of Winterfell and we know that the Night King is no longer with us, who sits on the Iron Throne at the end of this series? Has something changed in your eyes throughout this episode that now has pointed to someone else? Or are you sticking with whomever you thought at the beginning of the series would, in fact, sit on the Iron Throne at the end?
I don't know if I really want to venture a guess. I think there are several legitimate claims to the throne at this point, and that's what's going to make the next few episodes all the more interesting. The weird hookup between Arya and Gendry has me thinking, like, what's going to become of that? I mean, is that a legitimate claim to the throne? I think probably. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's not going to be Jon Snow. I think that would be the all too easy solution. So I don't know.
I think taking the field is a smart wager at present outside of Jon Snow. Brandon, how about yourself?
Yeah, I've been on I think it's going to be Dany with Jon's child and Jon having died. I've been on that tip for a while, so I think I'm going to stick with that. It should. I remember back to a previous episode of the Citadel. I think Mike was making the point that it really can't be Cersei. Like it's going to have to be like a real tough sell to the audience for it to be Cersei. So if you say it's not Cersei, then it's going to be someone fine. I'm going to go with Dany on the Iron Throne with the baby in my Game of Thrones clue.
I was going to say it sounds like clue. I was also wondering if we could get some Journey at a blackout scene towards the end of this one. But
yeah, it's good.
Frank, how about yourself?
No clue, right? So I'm going to go with something completely random and say that they're going to give us someone that we are okay with but don't really want, like Sansa. Like she's going to be the one we're like, like I guess I'm okay with it. Like, and I also know that regardless of who gets the throne, there's a huge debt that still needs to be paid off to the Iron Bank that Cersei has now bestowed upon the kingdom. So no matter what, someone's coming in with some, red letter, mail coming in.
So
follow the money. I like that.
There'll be like a deficit problem, like regardless.
Immediately, yeah. People are inheriting recession, so to speak.
It's not the debt. It's not the debt. It's the deficit. If we could fix the deficit, it's going to be those like 1980s conversations.
Mike, how about yourself?
Well, it's interesting. Frank kind of stole my thunder, but I wouldn't mind seeing Sansa take the whole thing, and even the Sansa Tyrion stuff. There's been interesting exchanges between Sansa and Jon, Sansa and Dany, and now Sansa and Tyrion. And not sure how it plays forward, but I just, when I think about what her character has gone through, and I've really come around to her as a character over the years. So I thought that was because like in some ways she's the truest Stark, like she's the truest successor to her father, I think, especially now that Jon isn't even Ned's son. So if you did want to have that sort of tie back to the first season, I thought that might be an interesting pathway. And then is Tyrion her hand, or is what's actually going to happen between Tyrion and Sansa? Actually, I'm more interested in that than I expected.
Yeah, they slipped that plot line into this in the crypt with the kiss of the hand and giving us an idea. Maybe something more will come of that. We also had an interesting exchange that if it wasn't for the Dragon Queen, you all wouldn't be here. You'd be dead already in the crypt earlier in the episode, which was a point that was intriguing as well. I don't want to leave anything unturned here on this episode or as we move forward. Does anyone have any further thoughts?
Your answer, Dan. Do you just ask the question? You didn't tell us who's going to end up on. It's coming right back at you, buddy.
All right. I appreciate it. I will say that I think in the end, Jon Snow will get the Iron Throne, but will denounce the Iron Throne and let Dany take it. I think that there's some plot lines out there. If you read about Jenny's song online, some people point to that, pointing to Jon and Dany's story. I think Jon will bend the knee one last time and let Dany take the Iron Throne, even though he is said to be the rightful heir. Well, I'll say Dany is the final, Daenerys is the final Iron Throne sitter. That's not quite right, but you understand what I'm trying to say here. I think that the Tyrion-Sansa plotline is a new one that I'm going to enjoy. I enjoy those two characters, and I enjoy their interplay, so I'm looking forward to watching that the next couple episodes. As we close, I don't want to leave any stone unturned here. Anybody have any final takes or any final thoughts on this episode or what we have next on Game of Thrones as we move forward? I open the floor to anyone who wants to raise their voice at this present moment.
I've got a lingering question about a small detail that I could just go back and confirm, but I could ask you guys since you're here. Sure. Wasn't it prophesied that Varys would die on the same night that Lady Melisandre would? In
Westeros, not in Essos.
Oh, okay.
They both have to die. Neither of them are from Westeros, but both will die there.
Got it.
Maester Jones with the answer.
Well, Ken said he could ask us because we're here. I'm here, so
it's good. You don't always have the Maester in your presence. Yeah,
that's right. Dan, you put out a call for any final thought. I just one more little bit of airtime for Arya. I think it's great that Arya ended up being the one who killed the Night King. Mm-hmm. She's become a character that so many people really like. She's not uncomplicated and meaning from a good evil spectrum. Like she's got some complexity to her. But it could have been Jon. Like Jon was probably the odds-on favorite to kill the Night King once the Night King was introduced, when we knew Jon and Arya like back 6 years ago or whenever he was first introduced. And it was great to see her. I mean, Frank, you made this point, like she is the one who's really most suited for this, like trained for this. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was nice to give a W to Arya Stark.
I agree. I would second that one for sure. Anybody else final thoughts as we wrap up the live stream on this week's episode 3 of Game of Thrones?
One thing, just sort of building on what Brandon was talking about, like we don't necessarily need to make our bets now, but like who takes Cersei out, I think is an interesting question now, and how does she go? Because I think she's gonna go, and it's just a question of how does she go? Because now you got Jaime's in the mix, Dany's in the mix. Obviously Arya, she's still top of Arya's list. It is interesting to kind of play that thing forward. Like how's that going to work? So like I do think there'll be more intrigue and like betrayals, like poison. Like nobody's been poisoned in a while, so like I feel like the swords only come into play so much. I feel like there's going to be some other action, and then also I think there'll be more dialogue around death, because like if you think about when people are dying or when they're poisoned or flipped or betrayed, we really haven't seen much of that yet this season, and I am realizing I kind of want to see a little bit of that. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next couple episodes, but I am curious about how Cersei in particular meets her match, or if she does. I guess maybe she she could wind up in a dungeon somewhere. Like I don't think it's going to end well for her.
She's not going to be captured. She burned King Landing down with the wildfire before she allows anyone to capture her again.
Yeah, she was about to give who was it? Was it I guess Tom and then Nightshade when that she was going to be captured the last time.
That's right.
I was thinking before Arya took out the Night King, I was thinking that it was going to be Arya as faceless person wearing Jaime's face after he died, killing Cersei.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they like went to the well. Like the Night King was the most threatening baddie because he is his death. And so they used Arya there. Like if Arya kills Cersei, does that feel? It feels a little much like she's the only. Thank God for her. She's the only person. She can be a one-person team.
I could see Bronn taking her out.
Could be Bronn. Yeah. So the Bronn's crossbow. We talked about this a couple episodes of the Citadel ago. It has to go off. Like you don't spend 8 minutes giving Bronn a crossbow and there's never return to it. So it has to go off. He has to shoot someone with it, presumably. Could be her.
Yeah, I would throw Brienne into the mix there too for avenging some Jaime misdeeds as the seasons went on. So I could see Brienne stepping up there and taking out Cersei. Lots to go there. Lots of people who may die as the episodes go on. Many survived this episode more than I thought. But we'll keep an eye on this. We are with you each and every week on the Citadel. Live streams to come as well as we continue to recap the episodes. I did a poll over there on our Twitter account. About 78% of those who responded said they enjoyed this episode. So to 22%, what were you watching? I'm not really sure what was going on there, but you still can vote on that one, and we'll have more polls in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening. As always, training and education. The Citadel.